I would like to call to order this work session of the Forest Grove City Council. The topic for tonight's work session is Senior Center Proposal Selection Process. In attendance is Councilor Gustafson, Councilor Martinez, Councilor Marshall, Councilor Valenzuela, and Mayor Wenzel. Absent tonight are Councilors Ewing and Rippey. And I would like to turn it over to our Assistant City Manager, Mr. Paul Downey.
Good evening, Mayor. Councilors, this is a revised presentation from the one you got in the package last Wednesday, and it's been significantly revised. So we're just going to take our time and go through it. One thing I've done is I've gone back to the very first meeting where we met, some staff met with the senior board, and what sort of kicked off this process and how we worked our way through it since then. That way the public can see what staff and council have done as we've gone through this. So if I could have the next slide. We're going to talk about purpose, background, updates, choices, and discussion. Purpose will be to continue discussions on operations, management, and maintenance of the Forest Grove Senior Community Center, which we'll just call the center from now on, for the provision of health and wellness, socialization, and personal growth programs for seniors and community members after December 31st, 2024. The RFP envisions the Forest Grove Senior Community Center name will remain the same. Okay, background. On July 15th, 2024, city staff were asked to attend a senior center board meeting. Councilor Ewing was in attendance at the council liaison to the senior board. City staff were told by the board members in attendance they were tired of trying to operate and manage the center and do all the fundraising to keep the doors open. They could no longer do both. They wanted the city to take over the operations of the center, and they would operate it during the transition. Staff told them that the city would need a letter from the board stating this with a date, that the board planned on exiting the contract so the city knew their intention and could present options, staff could present options to the council to move forward. The board asked if the city would be interested in operating the center if the current board stayed on in a Friends type capacity and continued to do fundraising, including bingo. At that meeting, staff indicated it was a council decision and the staff would have to prepare options for the council consideration, including the city take over the operation as management of the center. Staff told the board that this option would give the recreation program dedicated space for recreation and control of the space for scheduling. If this was an option to be considered, it would take time to go through the process with the council, who would have a lot of questions for staff, and the city would need time and resources to do this, i.e. take over the center. Another option was that the city could issue a request for proposal and look for another not-for-profit to operate the center. Some senior board members asked why the city just didn't take it over and not do an RFP. Staff answered that it must give council all viable options and then follow council directions. On August 8th, 2024, a letter was received from the Senior Center Board for an operator of the center that they will exit the contract with the city on November 15th, 2024. That date was later amended to December 31st, 2024, which is the date the city has relied on throughout the process. I won't read the letter. You've seen it before, so it's in response to the letter, City Council held work sessions on August 24th, 26th, 2024, and September 23rd, 2024, to determine what the city would do. The August 26, 2024 work session gave council some of the history of the center, including its budget and revenue sources. Two options were presented to the council. One, do a request for proposal, which essentially continues the current service model with the possibility of changing the terms of an operations agreement. Or two, the city assume management of the center, in which the service model would transition to city staff management, and the nonprofit could transition to a supporting entity like the Friends of the Library, which would focus on fundraising and doing the annual events that were currently being held. Staff concerns were time to complete the process and hiring staff when there is no budget to do that. After discussion, consensus was reached to further discuss soliciting a nonprofit through an RFP process to operate and manage the center. The next work session on September 23rd went over the RFP process, options for services to request, the length of the agreement, the criteria for a proposer, and the scoring criterion. Side of the RFP would be issued requesting proposals from qualifying nonprofits to operate the center for 2 years with a possible 1-year extension. The RFP would state the city will enter an operations agreement with a successful proposer under the following general terms and conditions. I won't go through all these bullet points, but first one, the nonprofit will have exclusive use of the center, the revenues derived from its use, including any lease space subject to city approval. They must offer health, wellness, socialization, and personal growth programs for the seniors and community members. Next slide, please. Must have experience offering the aforementioned services and must be able to financially self-sustain operations, management, and maintenance of the center, post hours, and you've seen the rest of these in the proposal, so we'll just keep going on. And again, the last part, the agreement was for 2 years, commencing January 21, 2025, and ending December 31st, 2026, with an option to extend 1 year. Okay. So from that point, on October 1st, 2024, we issued the RFP and we received 2 proposals on October 21st from Central Cultural and the City Club. On November 4th, 2024, the council interviewed the 2 proposers and reached consensus to offer Central Cultural the contract for a 1-year period with a possible 1-year extension. The next day, staff sent notice of intents to award to Central Cultural and the City Club, informing them of the council's intent to award the operations agreement to Centro for an initial 1-year period with a possible 1-year extension. Next slide, please. So staff began discussions with Centro, who said a 1-year contract would not be acceptable to them, as they felt it did not give them sufficient time to do community engagement and change perceptions to assure programs are tailored to the community and fully implemented. Staff told Centro we'd have to take that back to the council, as staff could only discuss a 1 year with a possible 1-year extension with Centro at that time. At the November 12, 2024 session, staff informed council that a 1-year initial agreement was not acceptable to Centro Cultural, as Centro again felt it didn't give them time to do community engagement and change perceptions to fully tailor and implement programs. Centro requested the 2-year term with a possible 1-year extension remain as was included in the RFP, or they would not be interested. Council had discussions on this issue. 2 councilors rescinded their consensus to award the contract for 1 year with a 1-year renewal and wanted more public input before making a decision. Other councilors did not specifically rescind their decision, but wanted more public input before awarding the contract. The mayor and 1 councilor were ready to go back to the 2-year contract with a possible 1-year renewal and continue negotiations with Centro. As a result, the council has not changed the 1 year plus 1 year consensus for Centro. If that does not change, Centro is not interested in contracting to operate the center, and they have reiterated that point to us. So, with no clear consensus, the councilor proposed that staff bring back options at a work session at the next council meeting. 2 councilors also wanted community engagement included so the senior community can give input. The other councilors did not comment. So, when we've listed Central Cultural's marketing and engagement strategy, they listed in their proposal for the center, and you can read those. Their strategic plans for operating the center include a community engagement plan to collaborate with the general public, center users, and key stakeholders to gather and build a consensus and ensure community-centered programming, which ensures that they are accessible and generates a sense of belonging for all users, no matter their cultural background. And their strategy includes tailored marketing and outreach campaign to inform the public about Centro's management of the center, the continuation of existing services, and additional programs available. And then after that work session, at the beginning of the council meeting, 14 people offered public comment. Updates since the last meeting. November 21st, 2024, which was last Thursday, a letter was received from the Forest Grove Senior and Community Center Board, which stated their goal has always been to provide for the seniors and community of Forest Grove. They believe having their board directly involved is the best option for the center now and into the future, and they want to remain in place like the Friends of the Library. They've had discussions with no final decisions about working with other nonprofits with similar goals or needs as theirs to strengthen themselves. Their goal is to partner with the City Parks and Recreation Department as they feel there is so much synergy working together. They've offered to financially assist the city to hire one full-time equivalent city employee to replace their executive director and provide a competitive salary and benefits. A proposed schedule of financial assistance was included. They do not intend to hire a new manager after December 31st, 2024. They would continue to support the events that the community has come to look forward to, i.e. bingo, luau, car show, trunk or treat, etc. Also, on Friday, November 22nd, 2024, the City Club withdrew its proposal to operate and manage the center. After consulting with the City Attorney's Office, the Assistant City Manager, as administrator of the proposal process, accepted the City Club's withdrawal of its proposal. This withdrawal removes the City Club as a contracting option. And also on Friday, November 22nd, the City Manager sent an email to the representatives of the Senior and Community Center Not-for-Profit Corporation, affirming the termination date and letting them know staff would present their letter to the council. And we just updated the letter on the last slide. So we get to the point now of choices, unless there's any questions so far or on what we presented.
Does anyone have any questions for staff? Seeing none, you can continue.
Okay, choices. First, working with Central Cultural. Authorize staff to negotiate an operations agreement for 2 years plus a possible 1-year extension with Centro. Again, Centro reiterated on November 15th that it is not interested in an initial 1-year contract. Or another option with Centro is have the City Council interview Central Cultural for a second time at the next meeting on December 9th to determine if the city is comfortable awarding an operations agreement for 2 years plus a possible 1-year extension. Pending consensus, staff could add a resolution approving the operations agreement at that meeting. This timeline would require finalizing an agreement with Centro Cultural on a 2+1 agreement before council gives a consensus to such an agreement. Another point is staff would be interested in negotiating usage of the center for recreational programming. Staff, as is trying to develop his recreation program, is having a lot more difficulty finding space and finding spaces to do the city's recreation program as it continues to try to expand, particularly for the adult area. City, the letter, when I say the letter, that's the letter from the senior board on November 21st, raises a perspective for the city operating and managing the senior center as was discussed in August at the work session. Now, to consider managing and operating the center, the city would require time. Staff has not worked on a transition plan due to the RP process. We were respecting the RP process and not looking at the city operating it because that was not council's direction at the time. Staff would not be able to staff the senior center as of January 1st, 2025, and is uncertain when it could staff and resume services if they're discontinued December 31st, 2024. Resources, is unclear what the resource requirement would be. A long-term funding plan would have to be developed. The Senior Center Board has offered funding to assist with 1 FTE for 3 years. Additional resources, potentially through an operating levy, would probably need to be secured. The other aspect is positions. Since we haven't worked on a transition plan or a plan to operate it, it's unclear what type, level, and number of positions would be required. Those positions would have to be approved through the budget cycle, whether it's done during the regular budget cycle or whether the council approves it through an off-period adjustment. So that's the end of the slideshow, so I will turn it back over to the mayor.
Mariah, could you go back to the slide that has the options for discussion? That'd be helpful. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to open it up for, well, it's going to double check. Are there any questions that council has for staff? Okay, and then I'm going to open it up for discussion.
Absolutely. May I?
You may go,
Madam Mayor.
Councilor Valenzuela.
Thank you. This has been a challenging journey. Many who are here today understand that. or are aware of that, I should say. And I'm going to support Centro Cultural because they're very good at what they do, and that is to serve the community. They have done it for over 50 years. And I do not understand and do not agree with reducing what was originally in the contract, which was to offer this nonprofit a 2-year contract plus 1. Why do we need to modify that? I don't understand. If that was the original writing on the request for proposal, why are we changing it and thinking about doing a second interview because it is Centro Cultural? If it was any other organization, non-culturally specific, as it has been named, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We wouldn't be talking about second interviews or holding them to, why are we holding them to a higher standard? As the only Latina on this council, this journey has been very difficult, very, very challenging. It gets really lonely up here. So that is my question, and what I would support is for Centro Cultural to be treated like any other organization, nonprofit organization, with what was originally on that RFP, 2-year plus 1. My 2 cents.
Councilor Martinez and then Councilor Gustafson.
So initially, Councilor Marshall and I wanted more info. We didn't disagree with Centro being part of the discussion. We were hoping that there would be time for more questions that we had to clarify some things that we weren't able to clarify during the interview process. And we were hoping that we would have done that last week, and there was some concerns, and we weren't able to immediately address those. So the process of choosing an organization to run the community center is a business decision, and this is one of the few opportunities we have as a council to be able to delve into the situation presented and make an informed decision, and the process should not be rushed, and it has been rushed. Political correctness and racism stigma stifle discussion. By understanding the concerns of some community members brought up by counselors, our attention can be directed to issues needing work. I know several of us, and I'm sure the whole council will agree, to come alongside Centro and the community through the process. My husband and I went to Centro this afternoon during their lunchtime. And they had a very nice lunch. They'd also done a white elephant gift exchange. I don't see that they would do anything differently for us as they're doing in the cultural center there. And it says on their statement that it will be culturally specific for us. It doesn't say that they're going to come in as a strictly Spanish organization. And I would be open to giving them the 2 years plus 1. And I'm like, as I think I said that already, we would come alongside and assure that the community is heard and that Centro is helped as well.
Thank you, Councilor Martinez. Councilor Gustafson.
Yes. First and foremost, and I wrote this down because this is a very, like many of us, this is a very, has become a very emotional topic. And I wanted to make sure that I can read what my thoughts are and not screw it up this time. I would like to first and foremost apologize to the entire community and city staff and the entire council for the insincere verbiage I used in the heat of the moment at the last meeting. I was completely mortified after I watched the video back. I used unintentionally an outdated and offensive term, and I completely regret if I had offended anybody. It came out wrong. As you know, we are searching for a group to take over our beloved senior center that's been here for a very long time. And in the end of August, the council was notified of this closure, and we worked as fast as possible. City staff really hit the ground running to save it. And we understand the importance this senior center has on our community and our seniors. Once the process began, many questions began to arise, and many of us felt that we did not have the time to properly vet our community to hear their concerns, and we had to rush the RFP due to those deadlines. All of us realized we made these errors by not having more conversations with the community, and we wanted to rectify that, which eventually led to that council meeting where our discussions were concerned and heated, and we are just trying to make sure that we do our due diligence. There's no excuse for my mistake, absolutely none. It was a brain-to-mouth disconnect, which I didn't realize I had done until reflecting on the meeting later. And I want to assure everybody that I did not intend to cause any harm. I incredibly value diversity and respect for all people, and I hope the community can forgive me. I appreciate those who called me out, and keep doing that. I welcome that. And I will be more mindful of my language in the future and take the time to make sure that what's in my head is the same thing coming out of my mouth. I would ask that the public forgive me and give me grace and judge my character, not on this mistake of which I feel tremendous, tremendous shame, but on my long history of human rights and social justice advocacy and my desire to do better. This being said, and I understand the impression that people may have about the council putting a pause on this and being concerned and wanting to communicate more with the community. I understand the impression that it is about the culture. And I assure you, I can speak for the council and I can speak for myself, it is not. Centro Cultural is an amazing organization, and I have looked up so many things that they have done, and I am in awe of what they have accomplished in these 50 years. Their wide range of programs support their mission for being a hub for the Latino culture and meeting the needs of the diverse community, while at the same time providing opportunities for others to learn about their culture. I am excited and I look forward as a city councilor working more with them, and as the city club president, working more with this amazing organization and learning from them. I have a history 10 years back in mergers and acquisitions. I've worked with RFPs for a very long time, and 1 year is absolutely not enough for any organization to step into a position. So it must be the 2 years with the one extension, in my opinion.
Thank you, Councilor Gustafson. Councilor Marshall?
If we are going basically based on we're going for the 2 year plus, I was for the 2 year plus from the beginning. I didn't care if it was. I was more concerned with wanting the community to be able to meet with Centro. That was it. I've even spoken to Maria from Centro. That was my main goal. It has nothing to do with brown, white, anything. I don't care. As the only man and only brown man up here, I don't care if somebody calls me brown. I don't. It doesn't bother me. What bothers me is somebody judges me on anything else other than that. I want everybody to feel comfortable going there. And whether it's just basic questions is what I think you're going to get. I don't think it's going to be anything about race. I think it's going to be, what are these services still going to be offered? Is this going to be offered? They want to know these things. And that was my only concern, is doing that. So as far as the 2-year plus 1, I've always been on board with that. And I've always said that Centro checks all the boxes. The only box that's there is, it wasn't on the list, is meeting with the community. That's the only concern I had.
Thank you. Thank you, counselors, for your vocal support of Centro. I don't have to do the history teacher in me made a timeline last night because after the last meeting, hearing about concerns of process, accusations of unprofessional staff, I was like really concerned. So I went back and did a lot of things. And so there's a few things I want to point out. First of all, our staff is above board, has not done anything nefarious, has been transparent, has worked with a timeline of November 15th and then December 31st. There's nothing behind the scenes. Like, this was all very transparent. And I think, the August 26th meeting said, like, hey, this is our choice. This is a temporary thing for 2+1. It aligns with our levy. It allows community engagement. It allows us to work inside of our 2040 visioning plan to come up with a long-term, financially sustainable plan, right? We're also doing our cost recovery fee study for Parks and Rec. All of these things intersect. This is the intersection of policy. There's been a lot of talk about a municipal model and then what we're doing. And for me, as someone who's done this for 10 years, the Forest Grove municipal model of how a small city with hardly any tax base provides amenity and services is through partnerships. I can't think of one department that we don't have at least one partner or multiple partnerships. The work that the senior board has done for the city since 1992 is amazing. I'm very hopeful that the last letter that said we still want to serve for the city of Forest Grove, we want to work with other nonprofits, we want to work with the city. I hope that's true and that we all come with that, because the senior board has provided essential services that the city has not been able to do. And I, for one, appreciate that. It's like, what is this when you break up or this isn't, I don't want this to be bitter. It's not a breakup. It's a change in how we provide services to our community. So, and, I want to say the same thing. Centro is also our partner and has partnered with us on post-COVID relief, has also partnered with us on housing services and SHS funds. And so I just think that this, again, is a really good opportunity to continue investing in the things that make Forest Grove. And that's our community and, the value we place in partnerships. I agree with the 2+1 as well. So I think there's consensus from the council to come back with a 2+1 for the next council meeting.
We will work in the operating agreement and bring it back to you at the December 9th meeting.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Come and adjourn this work session. I would like to call to order this work session of the Forest Grove City Council at 6:21. The topic is proclamation process, and I'm going to turn it over to our city recorder, Miss Mariah Woods.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for your time tonight. Tonight's work session is on the
Hang
proclamation.
on a minute.
Oh, a little louder.
Do you need batteries in the mic?
Oh my gosh. Can you turn this one up? I'll talk louder.
It's okay, I just think it needs to,
The purpose of tonight's work session is to
hang on really quick, Ms. Woods. If you want to have a side conversation, could you step out in the foyer? Because we're going to have another work session, please. I'm trying, Mariah.
thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. You're good.
The purpose of tonight's work session is to clarify the updated process for issuing proclamations. This is following on a work session that was held on November 12th that discussed the city's process for issuing proclamations, at which consensus was reached to amend the council rules of procedure to include council approval. We're going to have two parts to this work session, so we'll go ahead and jump into the first one. This is just to kind of to set more clearly the process that did reach that consensus before. So here, the current process that we have, we receive requests for proclamation either online, by email, sometimes written, though infrequently. I forward that request to the mayor. Once the mayor approves the general event, then I go ahead and prepare the proclamation, and then it's then added to the agenda for the relevant meeting. The standard request timeline for this process is 4 weeks. So with the amendment to include council approval, the process that we're proposing is to take in requests only by the online form that we have. And then I would then add that request and only the text of the request that we receive to the consent agenda. The council would essentially be approving the event and date, but not the final full text of the proclamation. Once that's approved on the consent agenda, I would prepare the proclamation and then add it again to the relevant meeting. The timeline for this, we've determined we can do in 5 weeks, and that extra week is just so we have time to add it to the consent agenda. The other parts of the process we wanted to address is requests from staff. There are things like Community Development Week, Arbor Day that staff typically requests. If something comes up, our proposed process is that would be added in a staff memo to the consent agenda. And then at the beginning of every year, there would be a single consent agenda item that would have a list of the proclamations we generally repeat. So the council would be able to approve kind of a bulk list of frequently repeated proclamations. So this, just so you can get an idea of essentially what would be included on the consent agenda, with requests from the public. This is the online form that we currently have. So it does include on there, on the box to the right, section with proposed proclamation text. So you would be able to get a general idea of the proclamation. But I genuinely do, when we receive these requests, spend some time kind of smoothing them out if they're a little bit rough, trying to make it more specific to Forest Grove sometimes. So there is some work that goes in modifying the text that we receive. So the consensus items on this portion, the council rule language, if we go with this process, would be pretty minor. So we would simply be updating it to say that we would add the proclamation request to the consent agenda for council approval. That'd be approved by the council, and then the mayor would sign it at the next council meeting. The consensus items we're asking about tonight are: one, the move to online applications rather than accepting these applications by email or however they happen to come in. And this is mostly to streamline the information that we receive. So that way, what we put on the consent agenda is consistent. We can make sure it provides all the necessary information you need to see. We do, obviously, if there's, accessibility requests that we have, we do work with people on that. If we go with this process and I receive an email request, I can simply direct them to the online form. So that's the first item. The second is, again, just including the text of the request on the consent agenda rather than the full final proclamation. And that's just kind of to save a little bit of work, essentially. So rather than having me, draft the full text finalized and then have the council decide not to approve a proclamation, it would just be kind of more streamlined to stick with kind of the original process. And then the final item is the staff request process set in the previous slide. So if you guys want to discuss that, if you have any questions, please let me know.
I have a question. how many other municipalities? I mean, I kind of want to circle back, and I know we discussed this a little bit in the last work session on this topic, but is it typical to have proclamations as part of the council rules, or are proclamations typically handled by administrative, like an administrative approach, like there's a process?
Yeah, it's definitely not typical to have them in the council rules. And that was, I think it was in our last slides. I don't think we were able to find a particular example where it was in council rules. I do think there was a question why it would be included there or not in the last meeting that I wasn't prepared for, certainly. And that's kind of in the second portion of this presentation. But the main reason for that, I think, is policies are often a little bit better set for existing outside of council rules. If it's like really specific policies like that, because council rules are kind of a bigger process to change than a policy. A policy, you know, we can bring a resolution in front of the council, it can be voted on, and then as minor changes need to be made, we can present updated policies. Versus council rules, we do have printed copies of those in a multitude of locations. So it is a little bit more of an extensive process to change those. So if that answers that
Yeah,
question.
thank you. Any other questions for staff? Okay, so let's open up the discussion. So are we just asking if we have,
She had a second part.
oh, you have a second?
Do we want to have discussion on this first part, or do we need that second part before we?
Well, I was going to have a discussion on this part if you
She
wanted
wants to
to
discuss
decide
on
this,
this
but
part.
we can come back to it if you want to.
No, it's fine. I think we can go through these. So is there consensus for an online application? Okay, thumbs up. I'm seeing yes. And then only the request is included on the consent agenda. And is that fine with people? Okay. And staff request process. Is there consensus for how we're doing that? And can you go back to that slide really quick? The staff, it's a staff memo with proclamations. Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
And I'm sorry, did we say the 5 weeks with just the request, or did we say the 6 weeks so that we could read the whole?
Yeah. So if you want like the full finalized text on the consent agenda, then it would be an extra week because I would have to draft that language.
And that's a
in.
decision you need from us?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I thought we had, yeah, I
If,
thought,
yeah. So if the consensus is to only have the text of the request on the consent agenda, then
That's
it would
what-
be the 5-week window.
yeah, that's what we had.
Yeah.
got-
It's
I
only if
thought-
you want the full finalized text.
Okay. I thought we had consensus on that.
Well, both of them go to the consent agenda, but one is a 5-week submission timeline where we're only seeing the request. And the
Yeah.
other one is a 6-week submission timeline where we have the opportunity to read the entire proclamation before approving it.
Right. I thought we had just agreed for the request, but does someone else want? Okay, so if you would like just the request on there, give me a thumbs up.
So would the request give us enough information to know what the full proclamation is about?
So it should. So this is again, the form as we already have it online. So it includes like the dates. It says when it includes their proposed proclamation text. So it would say, you know, what they kind of think the text should be. And then we can also, if there's a box that says where we can learn more about the topic, we can make that a required field if you want them to kind of
Oh, okay. Yeah,
connect somewhere
that would be
else so that
good
the council
too.
can look more into that.
So you kind of just wordsmith it to kind of clean it up.
Yeah. And it depends because we receive all kinds of different, sometimes it will be essentially fully formed and I just have to put it in the proper template. Sometimes they'll barely include proposed text, especially if I get them via email. Sometimes it's just a request for the date and they don't really care about the language. And in that case, I usually will pull from different cities, proclamations. There's some pretty standard versions. and
Okay.
Kind of Frankenstein it together.
Yeah, for me on this portion of it, I mean, I'm always looking for a streamlined approach that doesn't cause staff to do a lot of extra work. So I would just rather have the request because I wouldn't want Mariah to spend all this time drafting the whole proclamation for then it not to be approved.
Yeah. Mhm.
You know what I mean? So that's why I think like a
Yeah.
short, that's just my personal opinion is that.
Yeah, the proposed proclamation and then where we can find out more about it, that should be sufficient.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Councilor Gibson? Okay.
I think that's it for that portion. For the second part is a proclamation policy. So this kind of comes back to what we were saying earlier about having a separate policy. We're essentially recommending that in addition to this council rule change, we establish a more set policy that in this case, the council would adopt by resolution still. It's pretty standard practice. We would then, in that policy, be able to detail a lot of these decisions, the consensus you guys just reached. There was a little bit of discussion at the last work session on this about having kind of baseline criteria for proclamations too. And that way, again, it's adopted and a little bit more set so people can see where that policy is. And then again, we just would recommend adopting this outside of council rules. So it's, easier to modify if we need to adjust it. Let's see. So the consensus items here, this is just to direct staff to develop a proclamation policy. So in this case, we don't have one because we weren't sure if it wasn't quite determined at the last session if that was something the council wanted. And then we would bring this before council to consider, likely in a resolution. And then the other question, if we do develop that policy, if, again, it would fall to the staff would we determine if requests don't meet the guidelines, essentially, would they not go on the consent agenda? Or would the council want to see all requests, even ones that don't conform, essentially?
Okay. Questions for Ms. Woods? So let's go through. I'm in favor. I'm going to be pretty honest. And I don't know if this is, but I'm in favor of developing a proclamation policy and actually removing it from council rules to align with other municipalities. Is there any benefit to have it as council rules and as a policy? What's the point of that?
I don't see any particular benefit. Yeah, it would be up to the council if you wanted it included there. I think if you have a policy that's set by resolution, that's again just still determined by the council. So I don't know that it needs to be duplicative, but because that was a consensus reached last time, this was kind of the determination we came to.
So do we have a consensus to develop Councilor Gustafson?
Just to clarify, we talked about that the last time, what the difference, I asked Jesse what the difference was before putting it in the council rules versus a policy, and it really just seemed like it's the same exact thing, except for more work for you if it's in the council rules. So yeah, I think the policy is a good way to go.
Is there consensus to take it out of, can we ask for consensus of this? Is there consensus to take it out of council rules?
Yes, if it doesn't make any difference.
Yes. Okay, great.
Still applies the same.
Sounds like we have, well, I guess we'll skip my last slides. We're on the language change. So the consensus then is for staff to develop a proclamation policy. It would still be in line with those other items that the council came to consensus on tonight. And then we would just simply remove that section of council rules.
And then the second bullet point, does the council want to see requests that do not meet the guidelines in the consent agenda? I'm saying no. I feel like if you create a criteria, that's the baseline if it doesn't meet it. Okay. So there's consensus not to include those in consent agenda.
And that's all staff needs.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to adjourn this work session. Work session adjourned. To order this meeting of the Forest Grove City Council on Monday, November 25th at 7 o'clock. Will our city recorder please call roll?
Councilor Gustafson? Here. Council President Rippey?
Absent.
Councilor Martinez? Here. Councilor Marshall?
Here.
Councilor Valenzuela?
Here.
Councilor Ewing?
Absent.
Mayor Wenzel?
Here. Forest Grove City Council meetings are located on the land of the Tualatin Kalapuas, who call themselves the Atfalati. They are now part of the Confederate Tribes of Grand Ronde. Will the council and audience please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Testing. 1, 2. So I would like to recognize our outgoing city councilors. Unfortunately, they could not be here with us today, but we have 2 city councilors who this is their last meeting for their term of office. So I'd like to start with Council President Timothy Rippey. A big thank you to Council President Rippey for his service to Forest Grove. He was first elected in 2016 and again in 2020. Then the council elected him as council president in 2024. As a councilor, he has been an advocate for public safety, safe and reliable transportation, and a fiscally responsible budget. In addition to his role on council, he volunteers with many other community groups, like the Senior Center Board and the Forest Grove Rotary. The City of Forest Grove thanks Council President Rippey for his 8 years of service to the City of Forest Grove. He will, I don't know if we're going to mail this to him or drop it off, but here's his plaque of appreciation, and we'd like to thank Council President Rippey. Our second councilor who's ending her service on the Forest Grove City Council is Councilor Elena Ewing. Councilor Ewing is our city's longest serving city councilor, being elected in 2004. For 20 years, Councilor Ewing has focused her work on equity issues, continuing striving for equity for all. She is deeply committed to addressing homelessness and affordable housing issues. She believes in transparency and advocates for community engagement, so our city's future develops according to residents' vision. The City of Forest Grove thanks Councilor Ewing for her 20 years of service to the City of Forest Grove. And here is her plaque as well. Play with the battery. It might not be the microphone's fault. It might be the mayor's fault. Okay, we're going to move on to item B on the agenda. Public comment. Time provided for anyone wishing to speak to the city council on an item not on the agenda or on the agenda, but not scheduled for a public hearing. Comments are limited to 2 minutes unless additional time is granted by the presiding officer. The public comment period shall not exceed 30 minutes unless a majority of councilors present vote to extend the time. Zoom attendees may use the raise hand option to be called on. Okay. Our first public comment is Lowell Greathouse.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. I'm Lowell Greathouse. I live at 1048 37th Avenue in Forest Grove. Lived in Washington County for 50 years or more, and in Forest Grove the last 13. Actually, I almost thought tonight I wouldn't talk now given your work session and the decisions you made there, but I thought nonetheless sometimes it's just important to speak in any case. So I made some comments earlier, having watched both the November 4th and 12th sessions online. And so I just have a few comments to make. Okay. I wanted to say that I know clearly there's been a rough patch on the senior center, but what I wanted to do was, first of all, compliment the council on moving forward quickly to design a process that was expeditious in nature, given the limits that you had to work with in terms of timing. And you brought it forward in a thoughtful and positive way, and took the necessary steps and chose to turn the center over to a capable, experienced, gifted organization, Central Cultural. And in your work session, you made those decisions moving forward in any case. But I just wanted to compliment you, given the short time frame, what you did. I also wanted to say that I noted both in the session that just preceded this self-examination taking place within the council itself. And what I wanted to say about that that's important is that self-examination and humility on the part of the council, working things forward with each other and with the community, is what self-government's all about. And as a resident of Forest Grove, for me, that bodes well in terms of being a council that can represent the people. And so even though there's some rough patches among you and And in that process, I appreciated the humility in which I saw exhibited already. The second thing I wanted to say is I was anticipating more people being here given the last session, and wanted to say, you know, that it is important for people who are residents in the community to express themselves. And I understand how it's possible to feel uncertain when there's change that occurs, and feel resentment about that. But nonetheless, people remained engaged in the process. And I guess I wanted to say that publicly as well, that we want people to utilize their voice, even if it's not done smoothly or well and causes friction. The final thing I guess I wanted to say is we live at a time in which people are more easily tending to be divided, short-sighted, dismissive of others, and accusatory. And that's happened in several issues before the council recently. I guess we need to call that out when that occurs, but then figure out how together to move forward. So moving forward on our senior center, I believe it can serve actually as an example under Centro's leadership to demonstrate how we can work things through when there are contentions, when we don't work smoothly with each other. And so personally, I've been a Meals on Wheels driver with my wife for 5 years. And actually, having seen what's occurred with the center and how you've handled it and tried to work through it, I'm actually more interested, and I expressed this to Centro already, in dedicating more of my time, resources, and experiences to helping that go smoothly in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Dale Feek.
Mayor Wenzel and councilors, I'm Dale Feek, 3363 Lavina Drive. I've lived in Forest Grove since 1966. I love Forest Grove. Said that before. I sent you an email. I'm not going to hand out the my written copy of that. I'm going to read some things to you. I appreciate the last person's comment. I appreciate letting him talk a little bit more than the 2 minutes. We'll see if you let me do the same. I don't know. Email I sent to you, you have a link. I appreciate you looking at that 6 to 8 minute YouTube presentation. It's an interview of Timothy Snyder. Snyder is a historian and wrote the book on freedom. In reference to the person last time, there is a time in which we do have to take a stance. And this is a stance that Snyder takes and I take. Trump's picks suggest an attempt to make government dysfunctional by his proposed appointments to his cabinet. These appointments are not just poor choices in a traditional sense. These appointments, each of them individually, is historically bad. But taken together, these are not people who are going to be bad at their jobs in some sort of normal sense. Taken together, these appointments suggest an attempt to actually make the American government dysfunctional, to make it fall apart, to pervert it, to have it do things that it's not supposed to do until it's not capable of doing anything at all. It's not just that they're totally unqualified, it's that they're anti-qualified, that they're qualified to do the opposite of things they're supposed to do. What do we do now? We've got to maintain our own sense of what is good. We have to maintain our own vocabulary. We have to normalize the things that people are doing. We can't normalize the things that people are doing. If it's grotesque, we have to name it out, call that, and say it is grotesque. We have to remember that we are the same people we were before the election. Our values are the same as they were before the election. The things we prioritize are the same as they were before the election. I said it twice. I mean to say it twice. We need to do things that make the world around us better. We have to take sense of the shock and say, okay, shock doesn't license my adapting to new things. Shock means that something very wrong has happened. We have to remember, we think we have to remember what we think is right and start from there. One final quote. This is from Richard Hutchinson. He was a University of Chicago president. Justice and freedom, discussion and criticism, intelligence and character, these are the indispensable ingredients of the democratic state. We can be rich and powerful without them, but not for long. Thank you for listening. Let me go over a few minutes. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to provide public comment? Seeing none, is there anyone on Zoom who would like to provide public comment? I see Dolores. Dolores, you can begin your public comment whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I have a couple of questions. I'm wondering if the current activities at the community center will continue without being charged rent. And I know that Councilor Marshall spoke about the community meeting with Central Cultural. Yeah, Central Cultural. There was a meeting planned on Wednesday night and it was canceled on Tuesday at 8 p.m. I know a lot of people were going to be there to have these questions answered. I don't think there's a problem with the RFP from Centro, but I don't know why that was canceled. And I'm curious as to when we will be able to have our voices heard, just like Councilor Marshall spoke about. I'm also curious I'm baffled actually why this city council can't handle budget-wise the operation of our community center. I've heard our Parks and Rec can't take it on with their current staffing and budget, and I also have heard at last week's council meeting that you can't take on doing things for special groups like seniors or vets. But this isn't a center just for one group. It's a community center for all of us from birth to death. I wonder why this council can't reallocate our city budget funds towards our center. I want to say shame on you. My property taxes have gone up $900 in the past 2 years. And I'm wondering where that large increase in property taxes are being applied. I'm asking you, the council, to step up and do the right thing for our whole community, whether that be the city provides this center and operates and funds it, or Central Cultural. I have a lot of questions, and I know next week you're going to make a decision from what I understood. I hope that's what I'm hearing. Just a lot of stuff, and this is a lifeline to our community. There's no price we can put on it. It's invaluable, and I want to know how we can deny this lifeline. So still too many questions. Thank you for your consideration.
Thanks, Dolores. Do you think you could email us so we can have staff reach out to you? I'm trying to figure out the best way to answer some of your questions and respond. Typically, we do not do that in public comment, but if you could write, go ahead.
I know you don't. Yeah, I can do that. But that I thought was going to be part of the process last Wednesday, 11/20, and it was canceled. We could have had a lot of questions answered directly from Centro, what their plans were as far as the current activities at the center.
It wasn't set up. So this is Councilor Marshall. That was not set up as a city council putting that together. That was me doing it on my own and setting that up. So that was something that was done not as council. That was me just trying to get two groups together to discuss that. As far
I think that's a great idea, and I'm with you on it. But why was it canceled?
If you send us an email, I can go over any information you'd like. Like we said, we don't respond to that typically. I was just clarifying that was something that was set up individually and not on the council's behalf. If you send us emails, we can definitely answer any of those questions or concerns. That's probably the best way to go with that.
Okay.
Thank you, Dolores.
You bet.
Anyone else on Zoom who would like to give public comment? Use the raise hand feature, please. Seeing none, We are going to move on to item C on our agenda, the consent agenda. Items under the consent agenda are considered routine and will all be adopted with a single motion without separate discussion. Councilors who wish to remove an item from the consent agenda may do so prior to the motion. Any items removed will be discussed and acted upon following the approval of the remaining items. What is the wish of the council?
I move that we pass the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Councilor Martinez has moved approval of the consent agenda, seconded by Councilor Gustafson. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say aye. Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved by the Forest Grove City Council in a vote of 5-0. Item D, additions and deletions or deletions. City Manager, are there any additions or deletions?
No additions or deletions. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Any proposed by council? Councilor Gustafson.
I don't know if this is something that we should discuss at put on the agenda for a different meeting, but it's kind of associated with what Mr. Feek was talking about, and there's been a slight uptick in bias and hate crimes. And I'm wondering if we can do something to get ahead of this at the city level, whether that be more education, education in the schools that we can recommend. I don't know if we need to have a conversation about this to get a step ahead of it, or what the best path would be. Kind of asking my council peers if anybody has a thought on that.
I think so we'd want consent. Jesse, do you want to say something?
Well, if you'd like, I can have Chief Raymond is scheduled to present for the police department's annual update. I can have him include a slide on this if you'd like, and see if there's any kind of information out there from the county or state police or any other sources.
Does that work for you,
Yeah,
Councilor?
that works. Yeah, just some awareness to.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a good place to start.
Okay.
Good. Okay.
Yep.
Any other proposed by council? Great. So item E is presentations. We have the council will hold questions until the end of each presentation. A 2-minute reminder will be given to the presenter to conclude remarks. And our first presenter tonight is our Metro Councilor, Mr. Juan Carlos Gonzalez, and he's going to give us a Metro update. Good evening.
Hey, good evening. Can y'all hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, excellent. Gonna try and go swiftly here. But Mayor and Council, just want to let you know that very grateful for the opportunity to offer an update on housing funding and Metro's homeless response. Before I get into my comments, I do just want to really briefly say I was able to log into the work session earlier, and just want to very publicly state my appreciation for Councilor Valenzuela's comments. And I think that took a lot of courage and a lot of bravery, and I appreciate your leadership very much.
Thank you.
Coming back to this presentation, for the record, my name is Juan Carlos Gonzalez, and I proudly serve this community, my hometown, on the Metro Council. I'm joined here by Craig Beebe, who's our Government Affairs and Policy Development Advisor. We want to cover quite a bit, so I'm going to go quickly here. And we're going to start with a refresher on some of the voter-approved housing items on Metro's docket, which include the Affordable Housing Bond and the Supportive Housing Services Program. Then we're going to talk about some current updates in our regional affordable housing and services funding. We're going to discuss what we heard from partners and community members, and also going to hopefully review some proposed policy actions and next steps. Again, it's very important to me to always come to you with engagement and updates and asking for your advice as to how the region addresses the most pressing issues in our community. So next slide, please. So housing, plain and simple, is expensive in the Portland metro area. It's no secret. We all feel this way. We all experience it. And we've taken major steps locally to address the affordability housing crisis with the Affordable Housing Bond. I think of beautiful projects like the Valfrey here in Forest Grove, or Plaza Los Amigos in Cornelius, or the Dolores, which broke ground earlier this month in Hillsborough. that has delivered hundreds of deeply affordable units for community here in the region. And we're meeting our goals around those deeply units, which means folks with very little to no income at all, and also for larger units, which are often missed by developers and helps accommodate large families. Also, you'll see images on the slides that you can look over. Next slide. And the Affordable Housing Bond and Supportive Housing Services programs are two essential parts of the housing stability puzzle and how we look to align our housing strategy to address homelessness. So the Affordable Housing Bond raised $650 million designated to fund only capital expenses for housing. And then in 2020, the region passed a Supportive Housing Services 10-year tax measure, which was on high income earners and also large businesses, which went into effect in 2021. And it's set to expire in 2030 unless extended by voters. Next slide. So on progress for SHS, there's no denying that these dollars have made a significant impact on keeping people off the streets. It's really important to note that SHS funding is also only a larger piece of funding for the housing crisis because this funding leverages state, federal, and other funding as well. I think it's been a testament to the incredible work of Washington County and city partners like yourselves, service providers like many that I know have participated with the city and the community for stepping up to work and make a real difference. Throughout the years, I've had the opportunity to tour some of the camps that you've worked to address with the county and it's just delivering critical services. However, there isn't a path out of homelessness without a home. So if we could go to the next slide, please, which is where we are now. And that's why I'm here today. Simply put, the housing crisis is worsening just at the moment that the region's existing sources of funding for affordable housing are winding down. If we do nothing to improve the availability of affordable housing in our region, we risk that our future work is focused entirely downstream only after someone becomes homeless. And once someone reaches that point, we know that has impacts across the entire region and variety of issues from livability to our economy. Whether it's in Forest Grove or in downtown Portland or in Troutdale, our aim is to ensure that homelessness in this region is rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Craig to describe this process, some outcomes and key policy options that the Metro Council is assessing to really address our housing crisis and the homelessness crisis in our region. Craig?
Thank you, Councilor Gonzalez. And again, for the record, my name is Craig Beebe. I'm a Policy and Communications Advisor with Metro's Government Affairs and Policy Development Department. Thanks for having us out tonight. I'm going to walk through, as Councilor said, a process that we went through and some of the proposals that are on the table, and then we'll be happy to take your questions. So this slide really summarizes the work that we've undertaken in 2024, going back to very early this year when we began a process with stakeholders, community members, and the public. Really was a straightforward question. With that situation that Councilor Gonzalez just mentioned, how should Metro address this looming gap in affordable housing funding in the region and keep making progress on these issues? Finding agreement on how to fund affordable housing actually turned out to be something that most folks agreed about. Most agreed that expanding the existing supportive housing services taxes to allow investment in affordable housing was a good and urgently needed idea. But there were harder conversations throughout this process of stakeholders and partner engagement about how to also address accountability, governance, and public trust as we move forward. So it was critical from the beginning that we heard from and applied feedback from people with diverse experiences and broad experience from all across the region. And back in early this year, our COO, Marisa Madrigal, formed a stakeholder advisory table at the council's direction to bring together a broad diversity of interests, experiences, and perspectives that included county and city elected officials, providers and advocates from throughout the region, community-based organizations, and business leaders from across the region. We also worked with the Coalition of Communities of Color to conduct community partner-led engagement around the region. We brought forward engagement we'd done to inform the original housing bond and supportive housing services measures. We met with regional committees, the oversight committees for the bond and supportive housing services measures. We did public partner engagement, public opinion research, and more. And all that really culminated in a COO recommendation in July, which then kind of kicked off another several months of Metro Council direct engagement with partners and also work sessions that they've held since July, about 6 or 7 work sessions since that time. A lot of discussion on this topic. And where we find ourselves right now is a remarkable level of agreement on a lot of these pieces. And this is where the council has essentially directed us in a recent resolution that they passed in October. Generally speaking, what they've told us that they want to do, reflecting on what they've heard from the community and stakeholders, is to continue that regional affordable housing funding and homelessness funding for the long term and make it more stable and predictable in the long term. Evolve an integrated regional housing and services program to better meet regional needs and opportunities, and learn as we do so from our successes in implementing the bond and the supportive housing services measure, and also addressing some of the challenges that we've found. Both of these are especially supportive housing services, completely unprecedented measures. So we've learned a lot as we've gone through with partners, and this is an opportunity to address those going forward. So I'm going to walk through some of those changes really quickly, and we can come back to any of them if you've got more question on the details. And as you saw on the slide a minute ago, Council's working towards a decision this December on this. So we're getting close, but there's still some conversations to be had. So first of all, in order to address the looming gap in affordable housing, the proposal is that we would expand the allowable uses of HHS, which can only pay for services currently, so that they could include capital for deeply affordable and permanent supportive housing as well. And we would also, right now, most investments or all investments in the supportive housing services go through the 3 counties. We would actually also add a program to fund investments directly by cities, recognizing the role that cities such as yourselves, the unique role that you have in both facing the impact of homelessness and being able to respond at a really neighborhood scale. Secondly, around tax policy. We heard that we need to stabilize funding for the existing programs, especially with these really volatile income taxes that fund it. So what we're proposing is that we would stabilize funding for services by creating sort of a first bucket for the revenue that comes in to go toward the county's ongoing services, removing some of the ongoing revenue volatility that they currently experience from year to year, depending on collections. We would also extend out the business and personal income taxes for an additional 20 years, which would create that long-term program funding stability for services and for housing and be able to adapt as time goes by to the changing needs of the region. Additionally, in some ways to recognize that this tax has raised more than originally expected, we would provide some tax relief in sync with this proposal, which would reduce the personal income tax rate and as part of that sort of arrangement to also extend the program for so many years. And we would also index the income levels so that where the personal income tax kicks in, that what's considered a high earner income would kind of go up with inflation over time, recognizing that $125,000 in the year 2020 won't be the same in the year 2050. We also heard about equity and the importance of continuing racial equity as an outcome for our investments in the region, as it has been for the bond and supportive housing services measure to date. And so going forward, we would increase opportunities for community engagement and partners to be involved in oversight by overhauling the oversight and including longer-term program goals and key indicators that would actually measure success better and make sure that we're meeting the needs of community, both broadly and locally. Finally, it's been very clear throughout this process that any extension of the sunset and expansion of allowable uses for many stakeholders, partners, community members, and voters across the region really needs to be paired with improvements to oversight, transparency, and accountability. And that's a big part of this proposal as well. We would go from having multiple oversight committees right now to creating a single oversight and planning committees to strategically guide investments that would have counties, cities, elected leaders from both of those, as well as business and community leaders, providers, all sitting at the table, making decisions, such as developing for the first time a regional action plan that would really guide the local implementation plans for services and housing, and be able to adapt over time so that we can see what we're achieving, see what needs to be achieved, and measure how we're doing and continue to evolve and allocate to meet that. So the Metro Council, as I mentioned, is right now in the midst of these kind of discussions to wrap up some of the policy details of these, and they passed that resolution back in October that I mentioned. So right now we're working towards a kind of a complete policy package that refines some of the details of what you just saw, and to present that to the Metro Council by mid-December. We're also conducting public opinion research to inform the likelihood of support for potential measure, which would be necessary. Voters would have to approve the extension of the sunset and the expansion of uses, as well as any other changes that the council could choose to send to voters that I went through. And then, that we expect council to kind of make that decision whether to refer a measure and whether to adopt some of those changes on their own. We expect them to make that decision before the end of the year here. So, Councilor, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Craig. So, all right, everyone, just essentially to wrap up here, really want to hear what you think that I should be considering as your representative on the Metro Council and what the Metro Council should be thinking about in terms of these potential policy changes, and in general, our desire to help continue to make our approach to addressing homelessness more effective. So thank you for your time in allowing us to present, and we'll welcome any questions or comments.
Thank you, Councilor Gonzalez. We'll start with Councilor Gustafson.
Hi, Councilor Gonzalez. I'm happy to hear about the accountability and realignment to help. It sounds like to help streamline your processes to make them more efficient and more cost effective. I think that's a great process for all organizations at this time, just because of the economy, whether it's an organization or a government entity. So I'm happy to hear that. As far as the tax idea for high earners and businesses, high earners, absolutely, I agree. With the businesses, I'm wondering, is there a level of income that you're looking at where you would increase the taxes to the business? And I only ask that because our small businesses are truly suffering. So it concerns me that the taxes on our small businesses would be slated to increase.
Thanks, Counselor. So just to make sure with the question on the business tax, so currently the measure is a 1% business income tax on net income for businesses with gross receipts above $5 million. The council at this time is not considering a change to that specific mechanism. One of the things that has come to us is to evaluate the impact on the individuals, on people, everyday folks, or the high income earner folks that do pay the tax. Craig, I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to add there.
I appreciate the question, Councilor Gustafson. I'll just note that the business community has been really involved at the table. Representatives of several business organizations were involved in that stakeholder advisory table I mentioned, and definitely we heard interest in tax relief for the personal income high earner tax, but generally we didn't hear as much about the business income taxes changing from that table, or actually really through any of the other engagement that we've heard. So just essentially no change to the business tax to keep it just focused on those larger business with $5 million in gross receipts, as Councilor Gonzalez just said.
Thank you.
Councilor Gonzalez, this is Mayor Wenzel. Nice to see you. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Craig. I think what I would like you to know, housing, there's a housing spectrum of needs. And I think Metro, you've been doing a lot of good things, right? The affordable housing bond and then the SHS. I think I really would like you to hear that those SHS dollars have been really valuable to the community of Forest Grove. And I have concern, and I think obviously the homeless or the affordable housing was really successful, and that's why you're out of those funds, right? But there's still a need for sheltering, and there's still a need for services. And I am concerned that by taking from the SHS funds, that it's not really making the whole continuum stronger. And I think, you know, I just am really concerned that you're going to take from a area that we've started to build out. You know, Beaverton just opened their first year-round shelter. That's so amazing. And those services have to continue. So, you know, this new structure of capital and then services, those are intertwined. They intersect throughout the whole thing. And so I guess I'm just wondering, is there data to show that we don't need as much SHS dollars that we've been using now? Is that why we're going that route instead of a different way to fund this?
Yeah, Mayor Wenzel, thank you. You can imagine I get that question a lot. And what I can tell you, in a personal level and on the council level, we have a ferocious commitment to stabilizing SHS dollars as much as possible, especially for the population A focus, which is looking at folks that have experience chronic homelessness, might have a disability, and in general are experiencing some deep need. As I look at the example that you shared of the Beaverton shelter, I see that as really truly the highest and best use of the homelessness response, of giving people a place to stabilize, to receive the care that they need, and really look at addressing the problem from that lens. What the council is hoping to do with this effort is to really, ask the voters for a broader flexibility for the money. The money is going to continue going directly to communities, to the county, to our providers. And what we need is, the flexibility, in my opinion, to build the permanently supportive units, the deeply affordable units, which is ultimately where people, once they leave the shelter, they need a place to live as well, and to have that deep support in the long run. And one another important thing that I'll add as well is that when the SHS measure passed in 2020, it was per capita the highest investment that any measure has invested into homelessness. So essentially, as a region, we have raised our hands and say we are gonna tax ourselves because we really care about the solution here, and that's incredible. We have to look at this as our local match. How do we leverage this across all levels, across all funders, to bring more resources to the table? Because, as you've mentioned, the housing continuum is very broad. The need is very deep. And these funds are a very critical part of that solution, but they can't fix it all, and they won't fix it all. We need to be able to bring partners to the table, which is why we're including the oversight changes as well as a part of the consideration here, to bring our private sector closer to the table, to bring cities to the table, and hopefully unlock the power of philanthropy to continue making changes here. So anyway, coming back to your original point, the council and I deeply believe in making sure that homelessness is rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. And we're halfway through the implementation of this measure. I'm hopeful that as we continue to evaluate what might go to the ballot for May, that we look at a healthy transition period between, when do we start to spend money on housing, and to really make sure that we start to make really significant strides towards, ending unsheltered homelessness throughout the region and taking care of as many folks as we need. So I feel like I've said a lot there, and there's more I could say, but I just want to say thank you so much for your comment. And we need to work really hard to continue to address the crisis.
Thank you. Any additional questions for Councilor Gonzalez? I have not seen any. Thank you for taking time to meet with us and explain this process to us. It's definitely appreciated. Have a good night and have a nice Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Council. Bye.
Our next presentation tonight is the Watershed Annual Reports, and we have our Public Works Director, Mr. Gregory Robertson. Hello.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Greg Robertson, Director of Public Works. This is our annual update to let you know what we have been doing up in the city's greatest resource, which is our watershed, and what we're planning to do next year. With me is Barry Sims. He is with Trout Mountain Forestry. He is our contract forester and assists me in managing this incredible resource that we have. So, Barry, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Wenzel and councilors. I thought I'd start by just a quick recap of the lightning fires that occurred in August. I know you got a nice presentation, kind of debrief from the fire chief and fire marshal, which was really informative. This map shows the locations of those fires, and it also shows the location of the basically the watershed road system. As many of you know, the watershed is very steep and rugged terrain, and access can be a real challenge. We do have an existing road system with 18 miles of rocked roads, and that's just such an important resource for us to keep in good shape and maintain. I believe that having that road system was very helpful in these addressing these fires. The area between Clear Creek Road and the fires was thinned in the past 10 years, and that kind of helped reduce the fuel loads, and it also provided a little bit of assistance in terms of access. There wasn't a lot of down timber and brush to have to fight through for the firefighters to get to those fires and extinguish them. Next slide. So the ODF crews were able to get in there and put those fires out. This is from a few weeks later after, I think it was still fire season, but the danger had passed. Next slide. So road systems incredibly important. The prior thinning, I think, was helpful. And the focus that we've had in implementing the management plan, which is to do a lot of thinning and maintain pretty good access to most parts of the watershed. Next slide. This is a photo of an unthinned stand. This is about a 50-year-old stand near the shooting range, and it just kind of gives you an idea, not quite ready, but that's okay, of just how dense the trees can grow. The next slide is actually after the 2024 thinning. This is some of the areas that we thinned this past summer, and just gives you an idea for just giving those trees a little more space, allowing those trees to be a little bit more vigorous and healthy and a little more resistant to disease and drought. In terms of implementing the stewardship plan, of course, water quality is the primary focus, and about a third of the watershed is reserved from active timber management, and that's mostly concentrated around the intakes and the upstream areas above the intakes, the water intakes. The other 2/3 is subject to forest management, provided there are no impacts to water quality, and the plan establishes some pretty strict controls on the harvest, the amount of harvesting, and the type of harvesting that can be done. So there are limits on the size of openings. The openings can't be larger than 6 acres without retention. And we do use a lot of retention, and basically those trees can be seed sources for kind of natural regeneration of some of those openings, although we do supplemental planting to make sure those areas are fully reforested. Next slide. The 2024 harvest results, we ended up harvesting to about 2.4 million board feet with a net income to the city of $1.3 million. We thinned 59 acres, and we did 12 acres of patch cuts, which are those openings. And we did 2 units of what we call variable retention, which are a little bit larger openings, but there's more retention. So it's kind of similar to like a shelterwood harvest. Next slide. This slide, excuse me, just shows the harvest history over the past 10 years. And the plan specifies that the sustainable harvest level should be between 1.7 and 2 million board feet per year. And as you can see from this slide, we're averaging about 1.8. So we're kind of right in that zone that we want to be in. This year's harvest was a little bit more, but last year's harvest was less. So we're kind of, we're staying in that sweet spot, I think. Next slide. For next year, we've come up with a plan to focus on some areas that have not been thinned, like that earlier slide showed, a very dense young stand with lots of fuels starting to accumulate. So we've got 120 acres slated for thinning, about 10 acres in patch cuts, and 9 acres in variable retention, with a total estimated volume of 1.9 million board feet. And similar to last year, all of it will be ground-based, meaning we don't need to bring in a big fancy yarder, and we're not going to be working on the steeper areas of the watershed this year. Next slide. So this slide actually shows the blue areas are the reserves, and it's concentrated around the streams and especially around the Clear Creek area, which happens to be some of the steepest terrain in the watershed. At the south end, the harvest areas from this year along Scoggins Valley Main Line. That's the 2024 harvest, and then the 2025 harvest. The green areas are thinning units, and the yellow is our patch cuts, and there's kind of a pink shade that's the variable retention. But mostly it's going to be thinning in that back far western edge of the watershed. Just want to mention a couple other programs that we participate in, and one is a USDA program called Climate Smart Commodity Production, and it's intended to incentivize and reward farming and forestry practices that do a better job of storing carbon or reducing emissions. And the city's actually, I think the city's management is a good example of pretty carbon friendly, high carbon storage forestry. It focuses more on thinning and longer rotation, so growing those trees a lot longer than the typical kind of business as usual in Oregon. So we're looking at enrolling the watershed in that program, which could help offset the higher costs for thinning, because typically it is more expensive. Next slide. We'll also be working on updating the timber inventory, so we need to make sure that the harvest levels continue to be sustainable, and just kind of reevaluating that harvest level that we've set. The last timber inventory was 2011, and most large landowners have kind of gone away from one-time static inventories, and they're doing more of like a rolling inventory where you'd inventory part of the watershed or part of the property every year, every other year, and that kind of gives you a more continuous system, which is never totally out of date. So we're going to start on that this winter. This year we completed a road condition assessment, which was a new requirement from the Oregon Department of Forestry. We basically just had to update our culvert inventory from 2019, so that was a good process, and we didn't discover any new issues or concerns. And we were continuing to do road brushing and mowing, basically to keep those roads open and have good clearance for not only the forest management, but also for emergency vehicles in the case of like a wildfire. Next slide. Just a reminder that the city's watershed is part of our FSC, or Forest Stewardship Council group, which is an independent verification system for responsible forestry. And we're audited every year, and they'll look at a sample of properties. And typically the Forest Grove watershed gets looked at every other year. So this 2025, we'll have an auditor come out and review the management, and Greg's participated in that in the past. So just a reminder that that's there, and it's something that we've spent a lot of time on. So that's pretty much what I got. I don't know where I am on time, but hopefully that was
It was good. Are there any questions or comments? I have a comment and I have a question first. Did you take all the photos yourself?
Actually, I think I did take most of these photos.
They're
Yeah.
amazing.
Oh, thanks.
So good. I was like, oh, wow, these are, so that's a little bit of an aside, but I just wanted to point that out. The other thing is I'm really happy to hear that we're going to be joining some climate friendly, climate action, carbon neutral. I believe, one of the things we've talked about in retreats is, carbon neutral goals, climate action, and then also just, I think there's lots of things the city does do, but like getting all the information in a spot to saying like, this is how we are addressing climate. My one question would be, in terms of fire prevention, is there anything that we need to adjust slightly as climate changes and fires become more, common in this area? Is there anything we could do or should be doing a little bit differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think this year's fires was a good test case. So you had 2 lightning strike fires. They were sort of forecast, so the fire departments were ready, but they were able to get in and access those. If there was a lightning strike, say, deep in the reserve, that would be a little more challenging. But the only solution to that would be to build a road in there for access, which would go against all these other goals. So I think just being vigilant and continuing to update the inventory so we really have a good handle on what's out there and what the conditions are, so that we don't end up with a very distressed, diseased area on the forest that's very susceptible to high-intensity wildfire. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Any other questions or comments? Councilor Martinez.
I do appreciate the presentation tonight and that we do have a good forest management plan. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions. Thank you so much for joining us and have a nice Thanksgiving break.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item F, which is public hearings, ordinances, and resolutions. Ordinance 2024-07, amending the Forest Grove Development Code, Article 8, Development Standards, and Article 12, Use Categories and Definitions. File number 311-24-00034-PLNG. And we have we have not Brian Poole, but we have Matt Johnson, one of our senior planners. So I'm going to read my script really quick. This is a legislative hearing requiring City Council considerations at 2 meetings. Tonight's hearing is the second reading of this ordinance. At this meeting, City Council will deliberate and consider a motion approving, modifying, or denying the ordinance. We will now continue the public hearing for a second reading of Ordinance 2024-07, amending Forest Grove Development Code, Article 8, General Development Standards, and Article 12, Use Categories and Definitions, file number 311-24-00034-PLNG. So I'm going to pass it or turn it over to Senior Planner Matt Johnson, who will present any additional information received since the first reading on November 12th.
Thank you, Mayor Wenzel. Councilors, Matt Johnson, Senior Planner, City of Forest Grove. Since the first reading, staff has not had any updates or comments from the public to date. And since then, at the direction of council, staff has revised the ordinance to include 1 on-site ADA parking spot if a development is not required and chooses to provide no on-site parking. With that, available for any questions.
I have a question, and I'm not sure you can answer it, and Jesse stepped out, but I was not in attendance at the last meeting, the first reading, so I'm just wondering if I should recuse myself or abstain from voting on this. We can wait till Jesse comes back. Any questions for Senior Planner Matt Johnson? Okay. I will now I'm going to ask Jesse, I have a quick question. It's okay. My question is, I was not at the first reading of this. I was not in attendance last meeting. So should I abstain from voting on this?
No, I think you can
Doesn't
vote
matter?
on second reading.
Okay, thanks. Just want to make sure. So I will now call on persons who have signed up to comment on the ordinance. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record. Was there anybody signed up for comments, Mariah?
No, there was no one signed up.
Okay, so are there any proponents who would like to give testimony? Seeing none in the audience. If you would like to give comments and you're on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. Any opponents who would like to give testimony? Seeing none. Any individuals who would like to give other testimony? Seeing none. The hearing is now closed. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance 2024-07?
I move to approve ordinance 2024-07.
I'll second.
Thank you. It was moved by Counselor Gustafson and seconded by Counselor Valenzuela. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the city manager please read the ordinance by title only?
Ordinance 2024-07, amending the Forest Grove Development Code Article 8, Development Standards, and Article 12, Use Categories and Definitions, file number 31124000034-PLNG.
Thank you. Will the city recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Gustafson?
Yes.
Counselor Martinez?
Yes.
Counselor Marshall?
Yes.
Counselor Valenzuela?
Yes.
Mayor Wenzel?
Yes. Ordinance 2024-07 is this is the second reading, right? Is approved by the Forest Grove City Council in a vote of 5-0. Thank you. Okay, next up. Thank you, Matt. Have a nice Thanksgiving. Okay, so now we're going to move on. Sorry. To resolution 2024-43, adopting changes to electric rate schedule 4. And I'm going to turn over to Light and Power Director Keith Horman. And by his side is Assistant City Manager Paul Downey.
Good evening, Council. This resolution request tonight is for some language changes in our electric rate schedule, schedule number 4. Under some review, we identified some possible risks to the city, and we worked with our legal team and also our financial consulting team to close a gap that we found regarding load forecasting and the actual purchase of the power. So we did discuss this at the last work session at the last meeting. But we can take any questions if there's any confusion or anybody would like some additional information on what we're proposing.
Any questions for staff? Seeing none, is there a motion on the floor?
I move to approve resolution 2024-43.
I second.
Okay, resolution 2024-43 was moved by Counselor Gustafson and seconded by Counselor Marshall. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the city manager read it by title only?
Resolution 2024-43, adopting changes to electric rate schedule 4.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say aye. Hearing none, resolution 2024-43 is approved by the Forest Grove City Council in a vote of 5-0. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay. Resolution 2024-44, amending council rules section, council president to limit consecutive terms of service as council president. And I'm going to turn over to City Manager Jesse Vanderzanden.
I may ask for Mariah's help as well. Mariah, would you bring up there it is. So when the Charter Committee was discussing amendments for the charter, one of the things that they identified for potential change was the term of the council president. Ultimately, this was considered by City Council, and as part of that consideration in a work session, council decided to not have that language in the city charter, but rather to look at a potential council rule change associated with the term of the council presidency. And the city council met at a work session on November 12th. There was some discussion about this, but ultimately there appeared to be a consensus to look at changing the council rules to say, under 4.2, the president shall not serve for more than 2 consecutive years. This would be inserted into existing council rule language regarding other parts of the council presidency. So with that, that concludes the staff report. I'd be happy to address any questions the council may have.
Any questions? I have a question.
Yes.
In looking at other municipalities' rules, do they state anything about term length for council president?
The short answer is I'm not sure. I know some entities do have either rotating council presidencies or limitations on consecutive years, but I don't have a list of cities. We haven't really conducted an analysis of what municipalities have in their council rules with regard to the council presidency.
Okay,
we just haven't done that.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, what is the wish of the council?
I move to approve Resolution 2024-44.
Second.
It was moved by Councilor Guston and seconded by Councilor Martinez, and I will open it up for discussion. I'm going to start this discussion. I said this in our work session 2 weeks ago, and I understand this was brought up at charter, but this is the last meeting of this election cycle council. And so on December 9th, we're going to have an hour-and-a-half work session about council rules, ethics, some like onboarding, calibrating a council, a new team, as we have 2 new electeds get sworn in. And I propose that we table this and let the council, council rules are for the council serving. And it just feels not good to me to have a council vote on something for a new council. And this isn't like a policy. This is just like how they're going to work together. Like this is an agreement on what they think the right approach is to self-governing and working as a team. And so for me, it just doesn't seem appropriate to have a council on the way out make a rule for a new council coming in. I don't really have an opinion one way or the other because I would like to wait to talk to our new council and see the pros and cons to putting a very strict rule in the chart or in the council rules.
Has anybody ever served more than 2 consecutive terms previously?
Yeah, TJ served when I got elected. So that's what I was trying to say, and I don't think it was when I got elected in 2014. You know, TJ was council president. He was council president again. And the reason I brought this up wasn't like to take shots, but I literally asked everyone on that council to like say, hey, like, are we going to switch up who the council president is? And no one wanted to do it. I wanted to do it, but they were like, you know, I was only 2 years in. But so I'm just saying that like right now, I think, you know, I look at the school board and the school board rotates and they come to that agreement. They don't have anything in writing. They're just like, hey, you were the chair this year. Then the vice chair becomes the chair. And then, which I'm fine with however a team decides to do it. I think just my concern is, and I know that this was brought up at charter and it's unfortunate, but I just don't think we should make a rule for a new council. So I would just say like, can we add this to the things we highlight in that work session for council rules?
I support that.
Go ahead, Councilor Guston.
So we did discuss this at one of the previous meetings, and I'm on board with what Councilor Ewing and Councilor Rippey were talking about. It's the wisdom of a council that's been around for a while that builds these council rules. And it isn't a new council that we're receiving, it's 2 new counselors that we're receiving. And I think it's important for us to use the wisdom of counselors who have been on council to make those council rules. So I'm surprised that we're having a long work session about council rules, because I thought that we had all agreed at the last meeting where we discussed this, that wisdom of each year of the counselors and changing those counselor rules based on events and based on changes was the way to go, instead of creating new council rules every 2 years is what that would be. It would mean changing council rules every 2 years if we go along with the new counselors, new rules type of scenario. So I disagree with making council rules for individual onboarding of counselors. And I agree with the council president limiting the consecutive terms. And the other thing that we talked about when you brought up that nobody wanted to be the council president, I haven't seen that happen since I've been on council. And that was also discussed, that all of us as counselors, we have expectations when we join as council, when we're running for election. And this should be just one of the expectations, is when you come on as council, you may be asked to become council president. And that's just a responsibility that we have as counselors. And not only that, but it's enriching and it's important for us to grow as people, and gives us an opportunity for that.
Yeah. And may I, were you done, Donna?
I'm sorry?
Were you done? Were you finished?
I am done.
Okay, all right.
Sorry.
Well, I've never supported some of the changes. For example, changing political leader, or, changing the title of the mayor. There are things that I didn't support it, but I was in the minority here. And I think we're talking about a 2-term, right, to setting limits. So I don't, even if we're expected to do it, 2-year shouldn't be 2 or 4 years. We can discuss that. I don't see why it's a problem to discuss it when everybody else here is here, who's supposedly going to be expected to do this sometime.
Councilor Martinez.
Did I just totally, it's getting late, so I'm not being very eloquent.
I thought you said that pretty well.
Okay.
I
Does
understood
it
what you were
have to be
saying.
late for me not to be eloquent? There's 5 of us here, and it's not going to change that much. I am in agreement with Councilor Gustafson and the comments that she made, and I think we should go ahead and make the changes. I don't see where it should be an issue.
Councilor Marshall.
You don't want to wait?
My stance is that I'm either way. I understand both sides of it, but like you said, when you wanted to run, or you wanted to be council president, TJ was in that spot for so many years, and you didn't get the chance to jump in because they just kind of, it was an assumed he's going to stay there. I think this makes more sense to put the 2 years on there. It's not going to change necessarily in 2 years. Somebody else can jump onto it. In 2 years, somebody else can jump onto it. Now, my question is, if there's that person on there for 2 years and nobody else steps up to it, is it just
That's what I'm
voted
saying.
into it? This clarification on my end.
Somebody else would have to do it. Like if,
So it
so
would
if
be
you,
imposed onto it.
And somebody else should be expected
Yeah,
to do
and
it.
that's-
We're adults here, so
I think that a couple of things I want to address. I think what I heard from Councilor, I think actually you said it more eloquently than I said it. If, I'm hearing some individuals say that that's an expectation, that you should have to serve as council president during your term or be prepared to. But my point is, we're making an expectation for people who are going to literally be sworn in at the next meeting. This will go into effect the next meeting. So if we're going to expect them to do something, then we should include them in the decision making.
there are 2 people out of 6.
So they don't need to step up to do it.
Well, and then the thing, and I wanted to address what Councilor Gustafson said, that the work session about council rules is to calibrate everyone to make sure like people understand the difference between speaking as an individual and like that you're always an elected person. I mean, there's like rules that we want to make sure that is good for all of us to be reminded of. And then that, so we know like these are the rules, this is how we're going to conduct ourselves in this place. It's not to create new rules. It's to go over the rules and calibrate and make sure everyone understands what they are and that they work for the council. It's not like we're starting over. So, I mean, I don't know. Those are, go ahead,
Sorry.
Councilor Gustafson.
I was just going to say, I thought that they did that when they had their orientation. That's what I did when I had my orientation. I sat with Jesse and went over all the council rules. That was part of my orientation. So I don't understand why we would use the time at council to go over the rules. I mean, I look at them frequently anyway, but I thought that was an orientation task.
I think it's, again, I think that it's just meant to be like anticipatory, like it's I mean, I added it to the agenda because I think it's important that we look at the rules. There's like a review period, like we all calibrate, we say, these are the things we're agreeing to, we remind, and we have that agreement. We've done this in the past where every few years we go through the council rules as a whole group. This is not the first time. I mean, I think we did it right after you were elected the first time.
I don't remember ever going through.
We did it on Zoom.
Besides what, with the charter and everything, I don't remember ever going through it except for during my orientation and just myself going through the council rules.
We totally did. Yeah, because remember, Elena was like, we had the whole discussion about endorsements. We had the discussion about speaking as an individual.
Communication and stuff. Do you remember that?
We really,
I don't
we
remember.
really did. It's not like a new thing. This is like how we calibrate and how we make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, any other discussion on the?
We are just talking about this
This one.
resolution.
Yeah.
About a council president having 2 years, restricting the time to 2 years, right?
Right.
Whether we do this or not, right? Okay. Why can't we just wait on this one thing until they're all here? We're still going to have to serve, all of us. It's not going to make a difference.
And I don't see why we need to wait.
Whether
What's the
it's 2
difference?
years, and to me, that we wait is good, but that's what I think.
Any other discussion? Mariah, can you do a roll call vote for us, please? Oh, wait.
I move to approve resolution 2024-44.
I thought we already, you moved it and she seconded it. We're in the discussion. We already did that.
Did we? Okay.
Yeah. So can the city manager read it by title only and then we'll do a roll call vote?
Resolution 2024-44, amending Council Rules Section 4.2, Council President to limit consecutive terms of service as Council President.
Roll call vote?
Yeah.
Counselor Gustafson?
Yes.
Counselor Martinez?
Yes.
Counselor Marshall?
Yes.
Counselor Valenzuela?
Yes.
Mayor Wenzel?
No. In a vote of 4-1, Resolution 2024-44 is approved by the Forest Grove City Council. Okay, council reports. We'll start with Councilor Gustafson.
So I have a short report for the Public Arts Commission. There was a mural that we were looking at. There was actually quite a few murals that we were looking at, and a group of people narrowed it down to 3 different murals, and this is for Lincoln Park, the bathroom, I believe, at Lincoln Park. And I don't have a picture of it, and I wish that we did. In fact, I'm not sure if it's in the meeting minutes or not, but it's a beautiful, colorful picture that's going to wrap around mostly. Was it? Okay, perfect. It's going to wrap around the bathroom, and it's got lots of fun details. Like you can do a seek and find type of thing with it with your kids. So that's been selected. I'm super excited about it. Of course, we won't start it until summer, but I think is going to add a really big pop of color instead of that ugly green. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilor Martinez?
So the Sister City report, we did a debrief and a potluck a couple weeks ago, just that we had a successful delegation visit October 29th to November 1st, and the celebration dinner was also a big success on October 30th. I attended the online Zoom WACA meeting. Mostly what they were talking about was trying to fill in staff positions. It's a struggle. People leave almost as fast as they can hire. The Tualatin Valley Fire, WACA. Yeah. Of the dispatch centers. So, and then for our own fire department, I attended the meeting the first of the month for the rural fire district. We had a couple people leave and someone new starting. And then there's just some flex or flux, whatever, with the fact that Cornelius is going to start their own district. So there's a lot of questions just behind all of that. So they're working through the process. And that's about it.
Thank you. Councilor Marshall?
I was with Ann Lane. We were going over doing the interviews for the Parks and Rec. We had 7 people apply for it. We had sent Mayor our request. We had a lot of great applicants, and we actually had one standout student that actually applied, and he's for student advisory. Awesome. One of the best interviews I've had. So I'm really excited for that. As far as work sessions, we had a work session on the rental fees. Everything else seems to be going in the right direction for getting approved on the continuum, except for the rental part of it. So we brought our concerns with it as a group, and it's going to go through it and bring it to staff, and they're kind of going to mess with the numbers and see what they can come up with, and come back to us before they bring it to the council.
Thank you. Councilor Valenzuela?
Yes, thank you. So last Thursday, the Policy Advisory Board met, and the highlights that I will mention, there were some changes to the application for the CDBG grant. The applications are due in October. However, there were some changes to some of the wordage of some of the applications. Also, there was a public hearing for the City of Hillsborough Consolidated Performance Evaluation Report, the CAPER. And I have to send you the Washington County report, but we still have only a draft. So when it's completed, I will go ahead and forward that material to you so you can see. But what I would like to mention is that the focus is going to be, yes, on the homeless community, but mostly on lower income people who are also suffer of housing insecurity. So that's, it's going to be a great focus on that. For the Library Commission, we are done interviewing the potential members, new members, really great people, really wonderful people. So Colleen and I have met a couple of times to interview some of the members. So we will have a recommendation for.
Great, thank you. Jesse, City Manager report, please.
Couple things. The 2040 Visioning Community Outreach continues. The city has hired Veritas, who is working with both the city and SSW to conduct some additional Latino outreach, and we're looking at also scheduling some focus groups coming up in the future. So that's been progressing well. The elections will be certified on December 2nd. We've talked with the County Elections Office. Pursuant to certification, the new counselors, the counselors-elect, if you will be sworn in on December 9th. So at the next meeting. So for those counselors that will be sworn in and their families and friends, there'll likely be a ceremony at 5 o'clock prior to the work session from 5 to 5:30. We've historically done that. And so feel free to bring friends and so forth. With respect to the new charter, just a reminder, the new charter goes into effect on January 1st of this year. Not to complicate things, but under the new charter, for the next election cycle, the counselors will be sworn in. The counselors-elect will be sworn in January. So this is the last year that we will have counselors sworn in at the meeting immediately preceding the certification until the new charter takes effect. So any questions about that? All right, good. Public Works is moving forward on the Public Works Administrative Building. We had 12 proposals that were received, and we selected Howard Wright Builders from Portland to do our construction manager, general contractor. We're looking at starting construction sometime in spring of this year, next year, spring of 2025. It will likely take anywhere from 9 to 12 months to complete. So that project is moving along quite well. We are in the process of also applying for what's called a FEMA BRIC grant, which is a Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant. This is a fairly large grant. We'll have more for this on the council here shortly, but the request is going to be for $27 million, and this will be for our new water tank that's already in the capital improvement plan. It's been approved by the council. This is the one that will replace the existing water tank that we have up there that is not seismically resilient, and this new one will be seismically resilient. On December 7th, we'll again have Holiday in the Grove at the library. There'll be Cocoa with a Cop, and Mayor, you'll probably say something about EMIAC, so I won't say anything about that. And work on the teen area partition has begun. That has started. The west restrooms are continuing to progress, and of course the east restrooms are completed. And then in January, we will be having annual reports, in December, and then into January, we'll be having annual reports from staff, from all directors, just talking about accomplishments over the past year and then what some of the top priorities are for the coming year. This will be to inform the retreat process that will be happening on January 18th. That's scheduled for January 18th. And last, Parks is scheduled to give an update on both Kyle, Forest Grove Loop Trail, and the East Side Park on January 27th, all of which are continuing to progress in the planning and design phases. So more to follow on that. Unless there's any questions, that's all I have, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Last week, was it last week? Last week I attended the NLC City Summit Conference in Tampa, and I have a pretty long mayor's report, so I just wanted to highlight one thing. I went on a field trip to the Soul Walk, and it was the really, really, really cool collaborative approach. So basically, it's 40 some miles long throughout Tampa, and it is a combination of history, heritage, public arts, and economic development. And so they have different key locations throughout Tampa that highlight important African American historical events or figures. There's arts, there's sculptures, there's eateries that are part of it that you can visit, and there's stories behind it. And it was just such a great tour. I mean, it's like all the things. It was so amazing. And I've never had sweet potato pie before. And I had that. That was good. And the art was great, and the history. And, and I didn't really realize that in Tampa, historically, African Americans, like the first African American police officers that worked for the city, weren't allowed to be called police officers. So they were when they went back in history to try to map it out and figure it out, they were actually called informants, but they were police. I mean, it's just it was really rich in history, a great tourism thing. Anyways, I just think that there's potential. I think there's potential things we could do similar to that in Forest Grove with our Indigenous nation heritage, our Latinx community, our pioneers with Alvin T. Smith. I mean, there's just like some intersections there that I think maybe would be interesting to explore. I also went to the Western State Municipal States meeting at NLC, and just a lot of, talk about taxes, transportation. The league is going to try to make sure recreation and immunity, like we get something, passed through this legislative session with that. My Washington County Coordinating Committee meeting, that's Washington County Transportation. Hillsborough Mayor Steve Calloway is ending. He's term limited out. And so he's not going to be our JPAC representative anymore. And Jeff Delin from Cornelius is. And Heidi Lube, who's the mayor of Tigard, will be the alternate. I think those are really good picks. We're planning our next year's work plan. What we have, if there's something I'm missing, I can take back to the committee, but funding concerns, especially federal funding, under the new, this different administration. We're worried about the RAISE grant and some other things. MISTIP funding has already been changed a little bit with the county in the last couple of years. So we really are trying to advocate to protect MISTIP. That's Major Streets Transportation Improvement Program through the county. It was passed back in the 80s. And so hey, this portion of your property tax is going to be for roads. And in the last couple of years, the Washington County board members have had some budget situations that they say that, they have the ability to pull MISTIP funding to pay for those. So TriMet safety, there's concern that ridership is down because of concerns with safety. And then urban growth reserves is also on the list. At the chairs plus mayors meeting, Washington County Board of Directors is undertaking a CPO. CPOs are, the best way for me to characterize them is kind of like our CCE. It's a community engagement group, but it's run through the county. In the last few years, some of the CPOs haven't been running under the rules that they're supposed to run under, of being nonpartisan, informational. And so their Washington County Board is doing a CPO modernization process, and they have a survey open until the end of the year to get feedback on that. Washington County Board of Commissioners also wrote a letter to Metro pertaining to Councilor Gonzalez's report about taking SHS dollars for affordable housing. There's a lot of concern from the county for that because systems are finally being built out to provide services for people experiencing houselessness. And so they're kind of what does this mean for us and how do we continue to fund it? The library, I still don't have any money, for the library levy from the county. They still haven't given me any numbers. Did they give you any numbers? Okay. I just want to make sure, because every meeting with the county, they're like, oh, we're going to do this. And then it never comes out. Jesse alluded to my MYAC. That's my Mayor's Youth Advisory Council, which I'm just so happy that we have. They are going to be at the library on December 7th with Cocoa for a Cop, and with, I think Colleen has some musicians coming in to do some things. And there's a bunch of activities, but they are having a table there, and they're going to make Christmas cards for people at different residential facilities in Forest Grove. So Jennings McCall, the Beehive. So swing over and see them, and maybe help them make a card. This Friday is the holiday tree lighting at the senior center from 6 to 7:30. And Lincoln Park mural was picked, and that's really good. I have that on my list. And then I also want to say thank you to Councilor Martinez and the Sister City Committee, because I thought that the visit with New Zen, the New Zen group, was done so well. And I thought that the banquet was, Joyce did a great job too. So I couldn't attend the potluck, so I was in Tampa, but I really wanted to go and tell everybody that they did a great job. And I just had a question. I should have asked this earlier, but it's in my mayor's comments. Sorry, Jesse. We received an email about the swimming pool closing for a long period of time. So my question is there any sort of reciprocity agreement with Hillsborough Pool or Newburgh Pool, any of our neighboring pools that, for some people, that is their form of exercise, which we all know is self-care, mental, all the things, they have to swim. and it can, if part of their, so I'm just wondering, like, what's our plan about
So
that?
what I'd like to do with the consensus of council is let me take this back to Ann, and I think maybe we can schedule a presentation at the next meeting and talk about potential reciprocity and maybe any questions that you might have, if that works for you.
Is that cool with the council?
I think it's during spring break too.
The pool's closed during
It's gonna
spring
be
break?
closed, yeah.
But
I mean,
the
is there
idea would
like
be
a
to
way
do
to-
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, but like, I mean, I'm also kind of curious if it's the main pool, can they is it just because it's a construction site, so they can't even use the smaller therapy pool and the fitness pool, or?
I wish I knew the answer. I apologize. I don't know the answer, but I will take these back and I'll have Ann either send something to the council or give a presentation at the next meeting.
It said they were going to tear up the tile because the tile and the water thing all had to be, all had to be replaced.
Anything about construction and what it was going to.
And that could damage it with the water getting into that construction area.
It might not make sense either to have like a portion of the pool open and have to staff it.
You probably have to let water
See all these
drain
questions?
water.
Yeah, I am. I know there was a lot of kind of logistical issues and contracting issues, et cetera, that have been kind of associated with this. And so I think just some additional information, but I'll take these questions back to the director and have her come to the council at the next meeting.
Okay, and that concludes my mayor's report. So this meeting is adjourned. Have a nice Thanksgiving, y'all.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving.